Hello and welcome to Wholesome Monday. I feel like it's less Wholesome Monday now and more like Deep Dive Monday. But we're still reading a fairly wholesome story, I would say. Like nothing too bad happens. If you are unfamiliar with what we do here on Mondays, we deep dive into chapter stories that we are allowed to read because they are out of copyright. Right now, we are going through Nancy's Mysterious Letter, which is book number 8 in the Nancy Drew Mystery series. This week, we will be diving headfirst into chapter 9. If you are new here, I highly recommend you go check out the first 8 chapters so that you are all caught up on what has happened thus far. If you were here last week and you would like a little reminder, we left off with Nancy having gotten that very weird cable from the lawyer firm in London that told her she did not need to keep looking for Nancy Smith Drew. And then she remembered that she has another mystery to solve, which is the case of the missing letters that supposedly Edgar Nixon stole. I still have another case, Edgar Nixon and the money stolen from Dad's registered letter. So she is off to work on that. Chapter 9 is called He's Not a Suspect. Very interesting, very curious. The ringing of the telephone brought Nancy out of her meditation. The caller was Ira Nixon. He sounded very weak. Is something the matter? Nancy asked quickly, fearful that the mail carrier had taken a turn for the worse. Will you please come over right away? The old man asked. Nancy promised to leave immediately. She went to the kitchen to tell Mrs. Gruen where she was going. I hope he isn't worse, the housekeeper said. The poor fellow's probably starved. Nancy, I want you to take him a jar of the fresh vegetable soup I prepared for tonight's dinner. I'll be happy to, Nancy said. Hannah ladled some of the soup into a jar. She then put it in a paper bag, but before handing the package to Nancy, she said, "And don't forget to take that old shoe out of here." Nancy laughed. It's going to police headquarters as fast as I can get it there, but I must go to Ira's first. 15 minutes later, she arrived at Ira Nixon's little white house. The front door was unlocked and she let herself in. The mail carrier, haggard and worried-looking, sat in a rocker near the fireplace. He explained that he had a chill and one of his neighbors had come in to build a fire. Everybody is so kind to me except my brother. He gives me orders every time he comes here. Nancy sat down. Did he come to get money from you? Ira Nixon shook his head. Not this time, he said, and that's why I sent for you. Here's what happened. Edgar came here about an hour ago. As soon as he'd gone, I tried to get you on the phone, but it was busy. My brother was all dressed up as usual, and he has a new car. It's red. Nancy made no comment about the new car, but she was thinking hard. Yes, she urged Mr. Nixon, who had stopped speaking. Go on. Nancy, that boy had nothing to do with my hard luck. I'm sure of that now, the postman continued. He said he came here as soon as he heard about the mail robbery. He was as sympathetic as you are. Wanted me to give him some of my inheritance to wire a private detective and clear up the whole matter. Have you received all of your inheritance? Nancy asked. Not a cent. I told him that. Ira Nixon went on to say that Edgar had tried to talk him into handing over any money he had on hand. He said he would take care of all the details of hiring a detective, but some cash would help a lot. Nancy had her own idea of just how much detective hiring Ira would have received for the money, but she said nothing. So you see, Ira continued, you were all wrong about Edgar. He is not a suspect. He knew nothing about the stolen mail. He is too dictatorial to suit me, but I certainly can't say he's a thief. Nancy made no comment, but asked, Did your brother happen to say where he's staying? Oh, yes. "There's no secret about that," Mr. Nixon went on. "He is boarding up in Ridgefield. He even gave me his address. I have it written down here. Wait a minute. Here it is." Ira took a slip of paper from the pocket of his bathrobe. "He boards with a family named Hemmer on Harrison Street." Nancy got up to leave. "By the way, did your brother ever mention a girlfriend?" "Not until today," the old man replied. "Edgar said he's going to marry a rich girl very soon." "What's her name?" "He didn't say." Nancy wondered if it could be the English Nancy Drew. In any case, she decided to go to Ridgefield right away and see what she could find out. Before leaving, Nancy asked if Edgar Nixon were employed. His brother shrugged. "We never discussed his affairs. He was always well dressed and had a car, so I guess he made a good living." Further suspicion ran through Nancy's mind. It seemed most unnatural for a brother to be so uncommunicative. It was just possible that Edgar's way of earning a living was too shady for him to reveal. After saying goodbye to Ira Nixon, Nancy drove directly to police headquarters and asked to see Chief McGinnis. She was told to go right into his office. "Hello, Nancy," he said. "You've been neglecting us lately." He grinned and added, "I thought you'd have the mystery of the missing mail solved by this time." "Not quite yet," Nancy replied, "but I do have some interesting clues. Here's one of them," she said, handing over the worn shoe to Chief McGinnis. Nancy went on to bring the chief up to date about all the information she had on the suspect. "I'm going to drive up to Ridgefield and do a little investigating," she said. "If I turn up any valuable clues, shall I get in touch with you or the Ridgefield police?" "You'd better tell the chief up there." Directly after lunch, Nancy phoned Bess and George and asked if they could drive over to Ridgefield with her. George said at once she would not miss it for anything. "Is this a dangerous assignment?" Bess queried. Nancy laughed. "I haven't heard yet that Edgar Nixon gets rough, but then you never can tell." At once Bess knew she was being teased. "I'm not chicken. When do you want me to be ready?" "In half an hour, okay?" "I guess I could put on some lipstick and powder and get my hair combed by that time," Bess replied. Before leaving, Nancy called her father to see if any further word had come from England. She was told no. "I guess we'll just have to wait for a letter," the lawyer said. Nancy then told him of her proposed trip to Ridgefield and the new clues she had picked up. "Good for you," her father said. "Well, I hope the next time I talk to my daughter she'll have lots of good news for me." "I'll try hard." A few minutes later, Nancy set off. She picked up George first and then went on to the Marvin home. Bess was not waiting for her in front of the house, so Nancy honked the horn. Her friend did not appear. A look of disgust came over George's face. "That cousin of mine never watches the clock. She's probably writing letters and making phone calls and doing a lot of things, and here we are waiting." Nancy tooted again. When Bess still did not come outside, she got out of the car and went to the front door. At that instant, Bess opened it. She apologized for being late and said she had just finished talking to Dave Evans, who had called her from Emerson. "I have something interesting to tell you, Nancy," she said. "Ned tried to phone you, but you'd already left the house. I'm glad Dave caught me." "What's the big news?" Nancy asked, trying not to be impatient. Bess explained that the young woman who was coaching the Shakespearean play and was known as N. Smith Drew was indeed Nancy Smith Drew. "How marvelous!" Nancy exclaimed. "There's more to it," Bess went on. As the two girls reached Nancy's convertible, she related the first part of the message to George. Then she added, "Nancy Smith Drew has gone to Ridgefield." "Ridgefield!" Nancy cried out. The three girls stared at one another, the same thought flashing through their minds. Was it merely coincidence that the actress and Edgar Nixon had gone to Ridgefield at the same time? Or had she perhaps been drawn into some kind of racket with the suspect? Bess exclaimed, "Wouldn't that be awful?" George expressed a further thought. Maybe Miss Drew found out he stole the letter from England and went to Ridgefield to get it. Bess looked puzzled. Are you trying to say Edgar plans to keep her from learning about the inheritance? Could be, George answered. I wouldn't put anything past that man. Nancy nodded. All the suspicions she had had about Edgar Nixon now came back to her. Of course, all this doesn't explain the money sent to Dad which was stolen, she said. Edgar's a slick one, George remarked. Nancy was worried. Girls, I'm afraid that he intends to marry Nancy Smith Drew, perhaps in Ridgefield, and enjoy the inheritance that is coming to her. How despicable, Bess cried. And Miss Drew, I'm sure, is too nice a person to be tied to a dishonest husband. George grinned. In any case, we'd better get to Ridgefield as fast as we can and stop the wedding. And that's the end of chapter 9. I feel like this was a very exciting chapter, and we got another line drawing. Maybe like that. Can you see that lovely line drawing of Nancy and Chief McGinnis? It says, "Here's one of the clues," said Nancy. All right. Poor Ira, who's so trusting and loving of his brother. Of course, he would not want his brother to be a suspect. And isn't that the case most of the time when people know someone and then find out later that they did something terrible or shady or criminal? You often hear them say, what? Like, I would never expect that from so-and-so. And while Edgar Nixon has thus far not been painted very well, of course, you never want your family member to be involved in something kind of shady and criminal and generally dishonest. It's very easy to make excuses for them when you're in the thick of it. And then we didn't end on a cliffhanger, but we ended after a very exciting chapter. So this is what I mean when I say there are other ways that you can end the chapter to make you turn the page. It's not on some contrived cliffhanger like Nancy about to fall down the stairs. It is specifically story related, where we find out about Edgar Nixon all of a sudden getting married, and the Nancy Smith Drew also being in Ridgefield, and them coming to the conclusion that this Nancy Smith Drew must be the woman that Edgar is going to marry. Of course, at this point, it is all still conjecture, but I feel like the circumstantial evidence that they've managed to collect gives them probable cause to sort of assume that this most likely is the case. And of course, they told us at the very beginning what was going to happen, right? Isn't this great? So they get all of these clues. Nancy finds out that Edgar is in a Ridgefield. She goes to talk to Chief McGinnis. She gives over the shoe. She tells him about everything going on, like up to now, how they're going up to Ridgefield. I really love how her father is so supportive, but also nonchalant. She's like, I'm gonna go up to Ridgefield to see what I can find about this man that has clearly been painted in a super negative light. And even Nancy herself makes light when she's talking to Bess about whether the assignment, whether their task and sleuthing is going to be dangerous. She says, I haven't heard yet that Edgar Nixon gets rough, but then you never can tell. Yeah, so maybe you should be a little bit more careful, Nancy. Maybe you shouldn't just rush into danger. This is what I mean about her being young still. Her underdeveloped frontal lobe doing her a disservice here. And her dad not helping. Good for you. I hope I have good news the next time I talk to my daughter. I feel like this just highlights what a different time this was in the world. This would never happen in 2025. The Nancy Drew of 2025 is so far removed and different from 1930s Nancy Drew. And I realize it's fiction. I understand it's a story, but at the same time, when you're reading a story, you want to be pulled out of your world and into another world that seems real. Long, roundabout, winded way of me saying, this is how you get your reader to keep turning the page. You make the story exciting. You have Nancy finding all these clues. All of these clues from the previous chapters have all been leading up to this moment of when she finds out Edgar is in Ridgefield, and now she's going to go find out, either go to the house to find out information, either go to confront him, and then all of this stuff about rushed wedding to potentially this heiress who has an inheritance that she doesn't know about. So this is what is making me turn the page. This is what is making me continue through the story. And to Nancy's credit, she is bringing Bess and George with her. So they are a team of 3. At least this is not like the bridge incident where she was chasing after Edgar Nixon alone. She does have her friends with her. So if something were to happen, God forbid, at least there's 3 of them. They can have each other's back. Someone can go get help if something does happen. You know, they are working together and they're not going alone. And I do love also that Bess feels the need to get all dolled up for the occasion. It's a very, like, Bess and George in this series are essentially opposites. Bess is very tomboyish. She has short hair, which is, I don't know if it's unheard of for the 1930s, but I do feel like having hair that short is very attributed to men's hairstyles back in the day. So for her to have such a quote unquote boyish hairstyle, I imagine wasn't super common. And then you have the opposite, who is Bess, who is super girly, loves getting dressed up, loves doing her makeup, and not as like a discredit to her character or anything. I just really love the contrast around Nancy as a character, because Nancy is a little bit of both of them combined. She likes wearing nice dresses. She likes going to dances. She also really likes going out and solving mysteries and getting dirty and getting into the nitty-gritty of what it takes to solve a mystery. So she's a little bit of George and a little bit of Bess, and this shows up in the friends that she hangs out with, right? A little bit of girliness and a little bit of tomboyishness. What else can we say about this chapter? I don't know. That might be it. That might be it for this chapter. It was, again, I feel like these chapters are either these chapters are getting shorter or I'm just getting so into the story that I'm reading it faster. All right, who's excited for chapter 10 already? I know I am. Let me know what you guys thought of the chapter, what you guys think of the story so far. I would love to hear your feedback and your thoughts about the characters, about the stories, about what's gone on thus far. Do please let me know down below. If you would like to see what else I do around the internet, I have a Linktree and I have a Patreon where I read spicier stories that I'm not allowed to post on YouTube. If you are so inclined, you can check that out. I think that's it. I will see you guys all next week for chapter 10. Bye. Hello, this is End Card Alley. Big thank you to all my patrons. Your support gives me the ability to pursue my passions. If you're not sure where to go from here, you can check out one of my other videos. There should even be a suggestion on screen right now. If you want to stay up to date, you can smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell. I'm also part of the Arete Media Pantheon. I highly recommend you check them out at the link. They've got something for everyone if you're looking for something new to listen to. If you're a millennial like me, you might enjoy the Goosebumps podcast. There's Broadway, there's movies, there's even Star Trek. And with that, I will see you all in the next video.